Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all. Hey, welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Let's see here. How you doing over there?
I have no idea. I don't know.
All
if
right.
it's going to work, great. If it starts freezing up, I'll just stop the can.
It's going to work. It's going to work. Hey, guys, how are y'all doing? This is BC Sanders, co-host of Night Shift and also co-host of the Disruptors podcast with BC and Ski. We got a few of you friends in the chat. We got some new names that I'm excited to see here. Whoever said they made it before it started, hey, Liam, it's because we're starting a little bit later tonight, and that's because we're going to be joined tonight by Angie Solomon again. So if you remembered or if you watched last week's show, that was the case of, or it's actually not even a case. We're trying to make it a case.
Yeah.
Of Grant Solomon, and Angie is his mother. We got into so much detail with her last week that there's not nearly enough to have covered it all, and we all agreed that we would be doing a disservice to the entire case if we stopped where we were and didn't get into it again tonight. So tonight is actually part 3 of BC and I covering this case. So if you haven't, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to or watch parts 1 and 2. These all pretty much stand independently, honestly. You can listen to any one of the shows, but if you haven't, definitely go get caught up because I think your mind will be blown, and I think you will be angry. We don't often talk in subjectives here or speculations when it comes to things, but when we have facts that are clearly facts that cannot be disputed and cases are handled or deaths that occur are handled a certain kind of way, or if there is obvious gross negligence, then it's something that we're going to talk about. And so we're not the only ones, thankfully, for this family, even with everything that has happened, thankfully for this family, this is really coming to light. And so, like we've spoken on before, a lot of big names in the news and online resources and things like that have taken up the cause. And so we hope and think that the wheels are going to be turning on this and that some positive changes are going to come very, very soon. I think a lot of people whose hearts have been softened to this case feel the same way. So we are going to talk for a moment, and then we will be bringing Angie on here in just a minute or two. We actually have someone in the chat. So you guys, if you're a new listener to Night Shift, it is a true crime podcast. Oftentimes it's unsolved cases, not always, but often unsolved. And we have friends that hang out in our chats because it is also a live YouTube show every Tuesday, typically 8/7 Central, on the Andrea Up Late YouTube channel. So you can always see us there. You can log into YouTube. Doesn't cost a dime. You can hop in the chats, talk to us, ask questions about the case. And then usually at the end of the show, we kind of just do some more lighthearted banter with everyone. So if you hear us engage or call out names, it's because we are discussing things with people in the chats. So with that said, we have someone in the chats. What's the podcast? What?
It's new. It hasn't even popped out yet.
Oh.
Yeah. Change Gang.
Change Gang. Okay.
Yes.
So tonight, if you hear us reference someone called Change
Gang.
Change Gangs. Okay, yeah. Got it. Change Gang. In the chat. Sorry about that. This is actually a friend who lives somewhere else who is actually a crash reconstruction expert.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, wrong person.
Oh.
Yeah. That's CX.
Oh. Yeah, okay, I know who Chains Gang is. Who is starting a podcast, and we will talk about that at the end. So, hey, Chains Gang. Okay. Okay, BC's bringing all these people in, which is fantastic, and I'm getting them all mixed up. So I apologize to everybody. But anyway, all right, let's get going. Let's get going here. So guys, this is the Change Gang podcast. Hey, absolutely. And I'm so sorry that I messed that up. But we will talk about you and your stuff coming up here at the end of this show for sure. And yeah, there's C2. There's C2. Hey, C2. That's the crash reconstruction expert. We will be calling on you here in a moment, C2. So just ears up. Okay, guys. So this case hails out of Middle Tennessee, specifically like the Franklin, Nashville area and some suburbs within that. Okay. So just a very quick recap. Again, this is part 3. Grant Solomon was a senior in high school, very athletic, bound to be a collegiate athlete. He was a baseball player, and was 18 years old in July of the year 2020. Please remember that July of 2020 was the height of the shutdown of businesses and work life and social life and such due to COVID. And I say that because that's going to make a difference when it comes to, like we said last week, traffic patterns and different things like that on the highway, what you can inspect in terms of businesses. Just the most simple things that were the statements of the sole witness, if you will, to the death of Grant Solomon. The things he says, actually, just even thinking about what life was like in July of 2020 could potentially negate the things that he's saying. So without further ado, do not let me pass over anything or miss any details, BC. Will you not?
I will not.
If you guys are not familiar, BC is a retired homicide lieutenant. So he has just immeasurable experience and insight to a lot of the cases that we cover. And so I use him for that, for all of your knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounded terrible.
Yeah, but no, I knew what you meant. Everybody else knew what you meant.
Yeah. So in saying that, moving forward, in July of 2020, Grant had gone to meet his father, Aaron Solomon, at a place called WPI. That's Ward Performance Institute. All right. So this was like a private baseball training facility. So you could go there to get your one-on-one instruction. You can work on certain specifics with your hitting, with your pitching, etc. there. So the morning of July 20th, 2020, as far as Grant knew, he had a 9 o'clock in the morning appointment at WPI. At least that's what his father, Aaron, had told him. A little backstory, Aaron had been a long-standing member of WSMV Channel 4, which was a large news agency out in Nashville there. So a lot of people knew and currently still know Aaron from that time, seeing him on TV for all those years. And that plays a part in this as well. So Aaron and Grant are to meet at WPI that morning. Now, a little backstory that we started to get into last week is that, I can fix that, Liam, is that before this, Aaron and Grant had not spent alone time together, individual time, in a couple of years. They had seen each other at birthdays and family functions, but they had not spent any time alone. And the reason for this is because they were, you could say, more than estranged. There had been legal battles that we will talk about again and get a little bit further into tonight that involved not only Grant, but his mother, Angie, and his sister, Gracie. There was sexual abuse that involved his sister, Gracie. There was psychological, emotional abuse that involved Grant himself. And there was psychological and physical abuse that involved his mother. So at this point, his parents were divorced, and his sister was 13, turning 14 around this time. And Grant had told his friends that as he approached his 18th birthday, he himself wanted to go to court to get custody of his sister. The reason for that was because Angie was under a, I don't know if that would just be called like the judge filed a motion, whatever, that Angie could not, what do you have to sneeze? There it is. This should be a drinking game.
I'm so sorry.
Bless you. That Angie could not file any claims against Aaron for 6 years. Okay. So because of this, don't think that Grant wanted to get custody of Gracie because his mother couldn't take care of her. She could. He just wanted to be able to get Gracie out from under her father's abusive ways, if you will. And so Grant had been telling people this leading up to this moment that he meets up with his father. Now, he had just turned 18 weeks prior to meeting with his father this morning at WPI. Okay. I'm just giving you guys, I'm skimming the surface. I'm not touching on really any detail at all, but it kind of paints a little bit of a picture for you. So you get an idea of what we were looking at the morning those two show up at the baseball training facility. Okay. So what we have next, we all we know that happens is that we have from this point forward, Aaron's account of the morning. He is the only one. So you could say he's the sole witness, although he himself will tell you half the times that he doesn't know what happened. Other times he has great detail as to what he speculates happened. Mm-hmm. His story changes with the breeze and depending on who he's talking to, and has changed many times over the years. So we will, I think that Angie should be getting here pretty soon and we will talk to her, but let's go on back to that accident. And you guys, let's see here. If we have C2, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
In the chats, we're going to take a look at this truck. So you guys, if you're just listening, we've got a picture of Grant's truck. It was a 2015 Toyota Tacoma. It is in the ditch, a ravine, if you will, that's lined with rocks. Okay, this is at the bottom of the parking lot of the baseball training facility. What you can see if you were just listening is the front axle and the two front wheels are down into the ditch with the midpoint of the truck kind of propped up as it goes back up out of the ditch, and the entire bed of the truck and the wheels on the sidewalk that butts up to the large highway there. Now, what Aaron says is that this truck rolls backward down the hill and into this ditch. I'm going to play for you. We played it on the first part of this. I'm going to play for you. Let's see here. I'll pull it up in a minute. Aaron's 911 call, because I think it's important to listen to that again and exactly what he says, because since then we actually in the past couple of weeks have had some new developments with potential witness statements there. But let's see. Are you still there, C2?
So one of the things that we've been doing is talking to different people about just how the case, well, not even the investigation, but how a normal investigation would go involving motor vehicle collisions and someone struck by a car or that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So that's where, like, for the listeners, when you hear us asking about C2, it's just that, trying to get an opinion or an idea of what other people look for in an investigation. I never worked crash reconstruction, but a lot of this is, for us, common sense when we're looking at it. However, crash reconstruction specialists get into formulas and speeds and that sort of thing and measurements. In this case, you probably wouldn't have to deal with that much speed because you're dealing with a vehicle that inexplicably rolls through a parking lot and into a ditch. And then comes to rest.
Right. So you're going to hear, I'm going to let you listen to the 911 call where Aaron Solomon calls and he describes what he says happens to this truck and then ultimately to his son. I encourage you, if you are listening later to this, if you're not watching live, if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, to go on, you can just Google it, or you can go over to my Instagram page at Andrea Uplate. Either way, there are pictures of this. There are more photos I will put up following this show to show what we're talking about. And C2, who we're just going to keep calling him C2, but I think that's what BC was touching on. This is what he does. This is what his job is as a police officer, is to do this crash reconstruction. It's a certain kind of training, it's a certain kind of experience that's a little bit different. The reason this is so important is that because in any vehicle, any accident involving a vehicle, there needs to be an investigation in that accident, particularly an accident that involves a vehicle that ultimately ends in death. If there's a fatality because of this, this needs to be investigated. And when we talk about investigated, we mean usually the highway would be shut down, likely in one direction, if not both. It would depend on what's going on. Again, that's not a job I've worked, but so I don't know the specifics there and what would change that for each case depending on that. But this was not investigated by a crash reconstruction expert whatsoever. So this was not like forensically looked at that way. It was not measured. It was not reworked, or, none of these things happened. And so the lead police officer on the case who got here this morning is the one who actually will say, oh, I was the crash reconstruction guy. Like, this is one of those cases, y'all, we talk about them sometimes, where it's kind of like, you go to a retail store and you're not happy with the service. And so you ask to talk to the manager and they're like, oh, yep, well, I'm also the manager. And you're like, no, actually, I want to talk to your supervisor. And they're like, I just got promoted. So like, this case is kind of a lot of that. You might talk to someone or hear something and you think, oh, well, why didn't this happen? Oh, well, that same person was in charge of XYZ. So a few players in this case wear a lot of different hats, and we're going to get into that a little bit more deeply as the night goes on tonight. But I'm going to let you listen to that 911 call again, and then we're going to talk more about this scene.
I'm trying. Where's your emergency? It's 1357 South Water Street. It's off 109. Please hurry.
You said 57?
Please hurry.
Okay, what's going on?
1357. My son's truck backed over him, and it's rolled over him and dragged him into the ditch, and it's on top of him. He's trapped under the truck, and somehow it dragged him underneath it. Yes, my son is under it. I'm trying to call 911.
Okay, what's your name?
Oh my God. My name is Aaron Solomon.
And you said
oh my gosh.
1357 South Water Avenue, right?
Yes.
How old is the male?
He's 18. He just turned 18 a couple weeks, about a month ago. It's my son. Oh my God. Oh my God, this is not good.
Is he awake?
Oh, please hurry. I don't think so. He's not alert, right? No, he's out. And he's trapped. I got 3 guys here, and he's trapped under the truck.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
I understand, sir. Stay on the phone with me while we get somebody out there. What's your name?
Aaron Solomon.
All right, Aaron.
Huh?
What kind of vehicle is it?
It's a Toyota Tacoma, and the vehicle he's underneath the vehicle.
Okay, I've got that.
And it's...
Okay, I've got that. What color is it?
It's a white truck. That's my son. It's somehow backed up. Yeah. Yeah, I'm on with 911 right now. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Was your son working on it?
No, he was just getting out of it. We're on an incline, and I guess he didn't have it in park or something, or it wasn't engaged, or... Oh my God. Oh my God, I can't believe
still not responding?
No.
And he's still under the truck. No one can get him from under it? We've got units en route to you. I'm just asking you questions for we can update them, okay? Can you check and see if he's breathing?
Somebody's telling me that he's coming too.
Okay.
Maybe.
He's waking up, kind of keeping still. So he is.
Well, he can't move. I don't think he can move. I don't know.
Okay,
No, he can't move. He's trapped.
Okay, well, we got somebody en route. Now, when he wakes up, he might be
telling
scared.
him,
Can somebody
I'm
get
telling
down there and talk to him?
Yeah, somebody talk to him. Shit. There's blood. What, is he facing up or down? He's facing up. They said he may aspirate. We need to hurry. Oh my God.
So does he have blood coming out of his mouth?
Yeah, there's blood coming out. Yeah, somehow it dragged him down, I think. I don't know whether it wasn't in park or what, or if it didn't engage the brake, or... it drug him underneath somehow.
Okay.
They said he's facing up.
Okay.
But he's bleeding from his mouth. So, Grant, turn your face to the side if you can, barely, but be careful.
Don't move him, okay?
We can't move him. We can't move him.
All right, he's in there. I'm gonna let you go, okay?
Yeah, okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay. Let me get off of this picture. So you guys just heard Aaron Solomon's 911 call, and we discussed this in part 1. We have a few things to pay attention to here. Oh, hi. So we got somebody backstage. Let's go on and bring Angie on now. Hey, hey.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Welcome back. Good. How are you?
I'm good. Came in on 2 wheels. I'm good.
Good. I know. You guys, we having Angie on tonight was kind of a last minute decision at the end of last week's show, because we had covered so much that we were like, gosh, we've already had almost a 2-hour show and we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg here. So we wanted to go on and bring her back. And so because of that, she had to work around some work schedules, but here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. So is that me or you?
What's that?
Is there a little bit of echo? Angie, do you hear anything?
No, I hear my dog barking. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if it's just coming through on your, maybe on.
You think it's coming through? Should I put on some my AirPods?
Did it go away?
Maybe.
I think it might be my speaker. I'm
That
sorry.
might be
Hang
it.
tight.
You're
I'll
all
be
good. Yeah. Okay. So C2, while we've got you on, we're going to talk about that scene. Without knowing anything, C2, without knowing this case or knowing the claims or knowing the history, would you say that what you saw is consistent with that truck, that Tacoma? It was an automatic, rolling in reverse down the hill of that parking lot into the ditch and back up and out the other side to where the tires are almost fully in the road. And we're going to wait. I'm asking him that like he's here talking to us because he's in the chat. So we'll await his response there. But Angie, that's way better.
Thank you. Okay, great.
Perfect. So Angie, we have to catch you up a little bit. A guy in the chats that says, he just said, actually, gravity does not work that way. That doesn't at all appear the way it was said to have happened. So he's a crash reconstruction expert. And so that's what we've tried to give everyone tonight. Just a very brief Cliff's Notes version of Grant and Aaron, the teeniest bit leading up to the morning at WPI. We got started not long before you got on. So, and we're going to start here at this scene. And we were just asking if you hear us say C2, that's the crash reconstruction guy. So he's the one that's kind of like bouncing back with us after he saw just a couple of pictures without knowing the case at all.
Okay.
So that's where we're at. So Angie has gone obviously to the scene multiple times. So he's saying he's curious to know if a CDR download was attempted. It was. That would be the black box, guys, if you will. I understand that to mean that, right? C2 of the vehicle, and we do have that obtained. And Angie, do you remember off the top of your head what that said? I remember some of it. Okay, you want to tell everybody what that said?
That said, the black box says that there is no way that what the witness said happened could have possibly happened. The truck had an uneventful drive that day. The truck didn't top any speeds over 75. It didn't have any jostling, bouncing, nothing that would be. It was just very.
It was like an impact situation. Didn't it say like no impact or something?
There was no impact. In the last seconds that the truck was being operated, it was being driven. There was weight in the seat, and there was the seat belt was engaged. It was being driven forward at I think it was less than 5 miles an hour. I'd have to go back, but I think it was like 2. It was being driven forward. Then the wheels were turned sharp right. The truck at that point was put the ignition was turned off. When the ignition was turned, the truck was put in park. The ignition was turned off. When the ignition was turned off, the seatbelt was disengaged, and the weight left. The person that was sitting in the seat left and exited the vehicle, and that was the last motions of the vehicle that morning.
Jeez. So that actually corroborates exactly what, when we've all spoken about it, Angie, you, myself, and BC, it corroborates precisely what we kind of have speculated. And I know that I'm kind of just speaking out of both sides of my mouth here when I say that, because at the beginning of the show, I said we don't like to speculate. We don't. But in a case where you have one witness who potentially caused what happened here, and that's the only word you go off of, and an investigation has never to this day happened into it, and the injuries and the scene and everything else do not corroborate what that one witness said, then that's the only time that speculation I feel like is okay and worth it and worthwhile. And because of that, we're picking up a lot of interesting detail and things. I mean, this morning we were talking and figuring out some things that seemed off, right? So so here we are. So to get back to that truck, the way that you've described it, Angie, is that morning, the driveway that led up to the building, remember, Aaron's story is that the truck rolled backward. Aaron will say that he was parked in the parking space. Grant pulled up beside him. Grant got out of the car to get his baseball gear out of the back. Aaron looked down at a work email on his phone. Something caught his attention. This changes. Sometimes he heard a noise. Sometimes he looks up and didn't see Grant's truck. It depends on the time of day as to what part of the story you get. But either way, he exits his vehicle, does not see Grant's truck, turns around, sees it in the ditch, looks for Grant, then finds Grant under the truck. Meaning Grant would have been drugged down this hill, down this asphalt, into the ditch under a Toyota Tacoma. So not a super heavy duty lifted truck that's very tall that would have the space for 6'4" Grant to be under, and not have one abrasion, one bit of road rash, a torn shirt. It was July. You guys, July in Tennessee is hot. That truck had driven 45 minutes to an hour to get to where he's going. There were no burns, no black marks, nothing on Grant. We will discuss his injuries in a moment. But because of what Aaron said, that really causes us to have to look at it. I would say, unfortunately for Aaron, he told the story with way too much detail at first. And now we have to go back. And if that's what he says happened, then you have to look at that. And it's not consistent with anything that we see. So do you want to speak on anything about that truck? Or?
Yeah, like we've talked about, you bring up a good point about the clothes. If you're being drugged, then your shirt's going to be pulled up in a certain direction, or pants or shorts. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have any of that. And it appears that when Grant came to rest, his feet were facing the road, head facing the ditch, where you would assume it would be potentially the opposite way.
Right.
Not to mention, if you're getting drugged from a vehicle from the parking lot, the curb, the grass, all of that would be, laying down, or you would see some type of breakage of the grass blades and stuff like that in that ditch. And like we've talked about, we don't have that.
Right. Liam's bringing up a great point. A lot of you guys listened last week, and it shows because they're remembering things that we talked about. And Liam said that Angie said that not even his shoes had marks, and they don't. She has his shoes in his possession, and they are pristine, I would say. Mm-hmm. Right, Angie?
Yes. Hang on a second. I'm not worrying about the situation of that. Just hang on.
Okay, yeah, don't even worry about it.
Go ahead. I mean, I'm just not worried about what y'all see. You might see my fan, whatever. Hold on.
I don't care. We've seen fans. Angie is Grant's mother, for anyone who didn't grab that the first time. But yes, everyone in the chats is talking about how pavement, C2, I believe, said pavement's like a cheese grater with the skin. It is. I mean, it is. That's why you call it road rash. It's people look pretty gnarly over much less, to be fair. And Grant's injuries, like I said, we'll get to his injuries in a moment, but we're okay. So Angie's showing us his shoes now. Yeah. If you guys are just listening, I would say they're pristine in standards just for an 18-year-old boy already. much,
the
much less
laces were just cut off, but they're white. And
from
then
the hospital. Yeah.
I have both shoes, so it's not that I'm not showing both, but then there's just white socks that he had on.
Okay, so she's showing a white, like, tube crew sock. And it is it's the only thing that's happened to this sock is where paramedics actually cut it. You know, they cut clothes off of you. So it's where they cut it, a very straight scissor mark, not from any road, any kind of being tumbled or dragged or anything like that.
There's his other shoe.
So yeah, I mean, his shoes are untouched. So to think about him going,
that's a turf shoe, and the turf is perfect. The other thing that I really note, I just have to say this because I just noticed this for the first time, but there's this little black bow. I guess he tied his shoes.
Yeah.
But the other thing that is not there are defensive wounds. Like Grant would have fought that truck. So let's just say the truck's dragging. Where did it hang him to drag him? Well, there would have been some sort of mark or an arm gone, or an arm broken. And then if that's going to happen and a truck is attacking my son is huge. He's massive. He has amazing strength. He would fight back. He's going to fight the truck using his hands. He's going to fight using his knees. He's going to fight using everything he has to stop whatever horrible is happening to him. And yet his hands looked like they had, they were perfect. There was nothing on either side. No palm rash. There was nothing on either side.
So a lot of people in the chats are asking about his injuries, and I keep saying we'll get to it. So let's just go on and talk about that now. Someone asked what the autopsy declared, and that would be a great question, except for there was no autopsy. And the reason there was no autopsy is that his father, Aaron Solomon, declined one immediately upon getting to the hospital. We're going to get a bit more deeply into even that portion here in a moment, and the laws specifically in Tennessee regarding an autopsy when dealing with a vehicular death. And so, excuse me. So his injuries actually were, he had a bruise to his hip, a small bruise to his hip, which we've said before, that could have been from that day. That could have been sliding in baseball. He was an athlete.
No. I saw that bruise, and that's a strawberry.
Okay.
It wasn't even open. It was just like that regular scar that he always kept this time of year. That time of year from sliding. Baseball.
Yep. Exactly. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So that's so the bruise on the hip. He had a bruise to his left cheek jaw area. Okay. Yeah. And then Angie will tell you that's consistent with what for Grant?
He wore the Oakley sports goggles, and if he got hit in the eye, they were made to pop the lens out. So when, that's so that it wouldn't break and shatter. So anytime Grant got hit in basketball games where he was quite rough or other places, what would happen was that lens would pop out, and when it would leave just a tiny little mark, like a reverse triangle right here on his bone. Yeah. And so that I knew, I didn't have the goggles at that time, but I knew immediately when we got the goggles that the lens would be popped out, and it was on the left side, right?
Yep. I'm going to put up a picture of Grant, Angie, just so you know, so people can see these goggles. I think this one shows his goggles. So that's an idea.
Yeah. The ones, do you have a picture of the ones with the white?
Do on my phone. I do that you texted me. I don't think I have them uploaded to this. I'll put them on Instagram though. But you guys, like sports goggles, right? So, like she said, so Grant wore glasses daily. He wore them all the time. So could not see without them. So when he played baseball, they weren't just protective, but he wore glasses. Like he had to wear those. So like she said, whenever he would get bopped somehow in the face, they would leave that little bruise that he kind of consistently had, and that lens would pop out. So that's what had happened. So he had that bruise to his cheek, and then outside of that bruise to his cheek, the only other injury that Grant sustained, and I'm not minimizing it, it was actually a fatal injury, but it was a skull fracture to the back of his head. So he had some lacerations to his scalp and a skull fracture to the back of his head. That was actually what was the fatal wound for Grant. But let me get this off for just a moment. In saying that, when you think about what Aaron just said on that 911 call, and then we tell you how Grant looked afterward, these things don't make sense. It doesn't add up. Then we're going to move forward with that moment. You hear the sirens approaching as Aaron's getting off the call. That was around a 4-minute call. He gets off. While he's on the phone, he's saying, I have 3 men here. I don't know if you guys heard him, but he said, I have 3 men here. And that was his verbiage, right, Angie?
I think he said, I've got 3 men.
Oh, I've got 3 men here.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 3 men here. Not there are 3 men here.
I think it was, he said, I've got 3 guys here. I've got 3 guys here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. He said, I got 3 guys. Later, he goes on to say that they were wearing high-V vests. If you're not aware, a high-V is like a high visibility. So think of your construction type vests that are like the neon green, yellow, orange, those types of vests. He'll say, I think they were construction guys, or these construction workers pulled over. And where everybody has been completely blown away this whole time is that the whole time he's on the phone with 911, he's asking these presumably strangers that are near his son to tell him what's going on so he can relay it to 911. He's not cradling his son, crouched down near his son. He's not panicky, telling them to hurry, telling men to try to move the truck, do anything like that. He's asking strangers what's going on with his son so he can tell the dispatcher, because he's not there. What do you say to that, Angie? What details do you know about any of that stuff?
That makes me want to hurl. Yeah, it's just the whole, he never went to him. And in addition to that, he actually tells him the one thing, he yells down to him, the one thing that we don't tell a wreck
to turn his head
to the side. And the dispatcher says, no, don't move him. So, not going down to him says all I need to hear. I've talked to a lot of criminal defense attorneys who say, well, they don't go down to the victim because they don't want the victim to tell on them. To tell that they did it. They don't go down to the victim because they fear that the victim will challenge them if they're still awake, because he was shocked in the 911 call. He's still alive. Yep. I think he's coming to.
Yeah.
And I know him to know that is complete. Like, that's not supposed to be happening.
Yeah.
So, but just the fact that he didn't go, that he stayed, 20, 25 feet away up on a hill, and Grant is lying under a truck on his back. That to me says all I need to. That's just incomprehensible.
It is.
I've been on my knees with strangers before, on spur of the moments, under vehicles, praying with them, talking to them, telling them it's going to be okay, telling them people are on the way, asking, trying to see if we can get anybody to move a vehicle, or trying to see if we can get ice packs from a lady that was having a heat stroke at a ball game. All these things that I've been on my knees trying to help other people do. And then my son just laid there. And I think the other thing too is just the lack of urgency in the whole thing. There's no urgency in Aaron's voice. There's no urgency in, even in the recount of it, there's no sense of urgency in the people running to Grant or pushing the truck off of him, for heaven's sakes. But at this point, we've got 7 or 8 full-grown, large men who should have adrenaline pumping to help a victim, which I don't hear any adrenaline. But they should have just pushed the truck off of him. It'd be easy to push the truck off without moving Grant, just to expose him. They knew he wasn't. Yeah. It's just, but not going down to him is just a telltale sign for me that.
Yeah, I think that just says a lot. And I think that we've said a lot when we talk about this case, that Grant, and I'm sorry, and I hope you don't think that I'm being flippant when I call it this case. Obviously, we're talking about Grant, and I guess I'm saying this case wishfully because I want it to be a case. I want it to be, as I know you do, investigated. So in saying that, BC, what has been your experience when it comes to someone who has done something they shouldn't have done and distancing themselves physically from the thing?
Yeah, and everyone kind of has a different take on Aaron staying up in the top part of that parking lot and not going down there. And just like Angie's saying, those things can be true. It can also be, I don't want to see what I just did.
Mhm.
Like,
particularly if it happened spur of the moment.
Yes, spur of the moment. Didn't know this was going to happen. Now I've done something, and I don't want to see it. And just like we've talked about, is that what you're talking about with the truck?
We can talk about that.
Yeah, but like we've talked about with people who will cover up a victim that they're familiar with, a family member, the same way. Now he's trying to potentially cover this up physically. I need to pull the vehicle over.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. And Angie and I actually spoke on the phone about this earlier a little bit because, we have to, and Angie said it this whole time, we'll talk more about what she's done in this past 4 years almost in trying to get Grant's name out there and trying to make this become an investigation as it full well should be. And we said a lot. Keep in mind, guys, when we say open an investigation, start an investigation, that's not just churning these wheels and doing this crazy difficult thing. It's literally just going back over the facts. Angie's done the legwork for you at this point. She can bring you what you need. Going back over the facts, they either add up or they don't. And if they don't, you further investigate and you find something else out. That's it. So when we say they need to investigate, keep in mind, we're saying something just very protocol, something that should have happened the first time and it didn't. So it needs to happen now. All right.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that, Angie will say, you've got to go back behind it. You got to go back behind it. And what she's saying is when you think of something or something Aaron says happened, let's say, then you think, well, how could that have happened? You go back to the thing behind it, right? Until you try to get to what is the truth in it. And so we hear this 911 call and you hear this story and you read about it and you picture these two vehicles at the top of that parking lot to then have one of them, Grant's, roll down, right? And you got to get out of your head of that because that's what Aaron's told us, right? So that's Aaron's story of that morning. Who knows how it actually happened, right? So in saying this, excuse me, tell him all the way up to the governor. Yeah. We've got someone in the chat, Angie, asking about has this happened or a complaint filed here or have,
the governor and the attorney general, we have a memo between them that we got through FOIA that says it was a homicide. So, we've taken it everywhere. We've been everywhere with this. And I think it's important too, to say that, I've talked to Cheryl McCullough, who is an officer in Atlanta. And she just talks about when a mother has in dealing with police departments or with dealing with district attorneys, when a family member just isn't settled about the decision on a wreck or a accident or an incident, and it doesn't have to be vehicular related. It could be someone has passed and they don't agree with they just don't feel comfortable with she specifically mentioned something like a suicide. They don't feel comfortable. They just want the facts of how the police came to that decision. It's usually just really commonplace for police departments to come back and sit with the family member, in our case, the mother, Gracie, and I, and just explain to us in detail how they arrived at the decision they arrived at. And so when we say we want a case, we want a case opened. We want this to be investigated. We do believe that we do know there had to be foul play. Dan Hodges, who's a former FBI SWAT member, who's the head of the private investigator that we use and the head of our team. And he says Grant could have not died without assistance. So in that case, we're not trying to go after one person, and I'm tired of it just being directed at that one person. It's just what happened to my son. And if they can't sit down with me and just explain to me how they came to that conclusion, then I want it opened and reinvestigated till we get to a point where they can prove to me
precisely.
And that's really that's the first step. It's not, even the police department and the DA jump in and say, it's not Aaron Solomon. It's not Aaron Solomon. We're not talking about Aaron Solomon. We do not care.
Talking about Grant's death.
We're talking about Grant Solomon, and that I don't agree with the decision that was reached at, and that I have reached out to the police department. I've reached out to the police chief, Don Bandy. I've reached out to Ray Whitley, the DA, and no one will sit with me just to explain to me how they arrived at that decision. And if we come to if there's a discussion and I'm a rational person to talk with, and if we have a discussion and we agree, hey, wait a minute, there's some things that have come forward, just like the eyewitness, that we didn't have that day. We didn't talk to them. Let's just go back and relook. Everyone's human. But
Yep.
so that's what we're talking about first, is just looking back and saying, well, you know, I can't even get that, the humanity of them to sit down with me after 3.5 years and say, hey, this is how, you know, Mom, we arrived at that decision. And sometimes even Max says, you know, that's difficult sometimes to explain to a mother, a family member, and or a large family, how they arrived at some decisions. But if it's what brings the family peace, then that's what needs to be done. And right now, that's not been done. It was never investigated. It was declared a parking lot incident and closed. So,
yep. Well, and you know, BC mentioned that last time too. Like sometimes all it takes, if you know how, like you said, just prove it to me. If you know it is what it is, and there will be families who disagree, right? They don't want to think that someone died this way or that way, or by suicide or by whatever. And so, and he said last week, you know, obviously it's a difficult part of the job, but you sit down with them, you tell them maybe things you wish they didn't have to know, whatever it is, to show them how you came to the conclusion you came to, and you move right along. That way there's just no question. But that has not only not happened with you, they've actually avoided conversation with you at all costs. And I do want to get into that. And I want to get into when we talked about Governor Billy and we talked about the DA and we talked about all of these things. I want us to talk about those things tonight. So we'll wrap up what it looks like at the scene.
Well, and also I think at the scene, I think you all may have already said this, but you know, Grant was lying face up with his head near the building and his feet near the road, and the vehicle was not touching him.
Right.
He was not trapped. He was not pinned. He was nothing. And then I go back to that video that I got of Aaron the next week saying, you know, he never saw him. He never saw him. He never saw him. And I said, so he was laying like this? No.
No.
He was laying like he was in bed. And it was just one of those moments where the hair on the back of my neck stood up, because I knew he had been placed in a comfortable position.
Yeah. So before, I don't want to finish talking about the scene, this part of the show, until we at least do talk about this. So you had mentioned that there had actually that morning been, okay, again, the reason I brought up COVID at the beginning, guys, this wasn't very populated that day. This Ward Performance Institute, it was shut down. So if you guys remember, again, it's hard to remember just how bizarro land everything was at that time, but they were just doing individual appointments only. All right. So this was not going to be a place that was going to be full of cars and traffic in and out like a normal day would be for them. So as far as Grant knew, they had this individual appointment at 9:00 that morning. All of this has taken place around 8:39, 8:40, 8:43, those times. So Aaron said that they both pulled into that parking lot and Grant's truck rolled down. We've since learned some different things. Number one, we learned that there was a vehicle obstructing the actual driveway into the parking lot, meaning it would have been difficult to pull off of Highway 109. That's a decent sized highway, to pull off of that and straight into the parking lot. Okay. Which makes sense that Grant's truck would have been parked almost kind of parallel to the road. You know, picture him kind of like almost kind of pulling up into the drive and stopping, not fully into the parking lot. Okay. If that was the case, we now have, for anyone who asked about the truck, there were no forensic testings done. None of that on the truck. Why was that? That is because Aaron declined that as well. So I want you guys to remember, he has declined everything as it came his way, and all unilaterally, all before Angie even had a chance to have a say in these things. He denied an autopsy. We don't have one. He denied any postmortem examination. He denied the truck being forensically investigated or developed, if you will. So that's very important, because think about this. You think that this truck popped out of gear, rolled over, and tragically killed your son. And you're going to be out for blood, right? Whatever it is, even if it's misaligned, right? You're going to take Toyota down. You're going to whatever. So you're going to make sure that you can figure out just what happened. Just like Angie said, all you want is answers. So if you can't find answers and it comes down to the fact that the truck malfunctioned in your words, then, or in Aaron's words, then you're going to investigate that. And so the truck was not investigated whatsoever. So actually, we're going to fast forward a little bit and come right back to the scene. But for as far as the truck is concerned, Aaron gets it back in his possession immediately after Grant's death. Aaron holds on to it for quite a while. And then Aaron commits insurance fraud. And I can say that factually. I don't say things like that unless I know that it's a fact. Okay. Commits insurance fraud and convinces an agent at State Farm to sell it to total it. So he gets it deemed totaled and sells it to scrap. This truck was in no way totaled. We have the black box, if you will, right? That internal recording of the truck and what was going on with it. In fact, in the vehicle, the crash report, which, like I said, there was no reconstruction done, but there is a crash report that has to be typed up. We're talking minimal. There are 2 or 3 sentences. There's nothing on this thing, but it just has to be handed in. It should be thoroughly noted on, but either way. And it even says that this was functional. I think it said functional vehicle or functional drivability or however it's worded. It showed you there that it is not. It is anything but totaled. You have the pictures of it, right? So we know that. So he sells it to scrap as totaled. One could presume to get rid of it for all kinds of reasons, right? So that it can't further be investigated. Angie, in all her tenacity, at some point goes through and she goes to every scrapyard she can find in and around Middle Tennessee until she tracks down Grant's truck and actually buys it back. So Angie does have the truck in her own possession, for those of you who were asking about that earlier in the show. So Angie has the truck, which is amazing. I mean, like, all the applause to you for that, because that is amazing.
That's not just, I have to say right there, that's not just me. I have a very small but mighty, mighty team. And they're my friends, and they're people that have become my friends, and they're people that we've met along the way, and I feel that God has brought to us. But those people they were doing research late at night. That's how we found that. We have been trying to find the truck. So there's more than just me, but it was me, Gracie and I, that went to the scrapyard and set out in the lot until they loaded the truck on. That was a really huge moment to have just the truck.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Back home. Yeah.
And I say that to you now, guys, when we're talking about the scene, because what did not have pictures taken of it was the inside of that vehicle at that time. Angie, however, has her own pictures of the vehicle. We have some video that we will put out, but it's got what we don't know because it was not able to be developed yet, but potentially blood on the inside of Grant's truck. It would be like a spatter pattern on the right, like the passenger side, up and around the window, kind of up and around over the passenger window. So if Grant is sitting in his truck, the bruise, remember, was to his left cheek. Aaron is right-handed. These are things I want you to kind of picture in your head. Okay. So we've talked about this endlessly. We've talked with Angie about it endlessly. So it's not like we're trying to fully act like we know. We weren't there. No one was there but Aaron and Grant, unfortunately. So no one can know fully what happened until we know the facts from Aaron. But it all plays, I would say, and I want you to stop me at any time, Angie, if I'm saying anything that you disagree with. But if Aaron, or if, excuse me, Grant was essentially just sucker punched, just cold cocked while he was sitting in his truck by his dad. We'll get into the reasons why that could have very well been the case. Then it would lend toward potentially why there could be that blood on the right side of that truck, on the passenger side. And if Grant got out of the truck to confront his father, remember, guys, Aaron's 5'8", Angie?
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, maybe 140, 150?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Maybe.
So, yeah. He's a slight guy in that sense. And Grant was a really big boy. So, and I say that because it wasn't like Aaron had the physical power to just overpower his son. Aaron did have rage, and with rage sometimes comes some power that you wouldn't otherwise have. I will say that. But Aaron, let's say Grant gets out of the truck, they have a confrontation, a verbal confrontation, and those rocks, Angie will say it herself, are very unsteady. Those are kind of large, almost like landscaping rocks that are in the bottom of that ravine. So, you know, if you've ever kind of walked across anything like that, you put your foot on one and your ankle might twist and turn a little bit. So if Grant is standing there and he gets hit again, or we can even say it's the first time. We can even say they got in a verbal argument, and let's just forget the part about the truck right now, and they're standing there. Because what we do know is that's where Grant was ultimately found lying. So they're standing there on those rocks. They get in a verbal disagreement, and Aaron just cold cocks Grant. And at this point, he could do it a little bit easier in the sense of if Grant is down in that ravine a little bit more, they're a little more head to head than they otherwise would be. And Grant falls backward. Angie, I know we've talked about this a lot, like on the phone. So I don't want you to think that I'm just trying to be cold about it as we talk about it.
No, I don't.
And Grant falls backward. It could stand to reason that with his height and then the depth of those rocks, all of those that provides a greater distance. If he falls backward onto one of those rocks that were sharp, that could be that skull injury that we have. And I say that because not only do we not have any injuries consistent with him being dragged and rolled and pulled under a vehicle from the parking lot down, we also don't have any injuries consistent with a truck rolling over him and running over him. And we know that the axle was not on him, like Aaron says later. He was not pinned physically by the truck. And we don't have tire wounds, crushing chest injuries, these kinds of things to Grant's body. So he was not only not drugged, he was not run over. The truck was over him because we have started to believe that possibly with the truck parked just where it was, and this would then be backed up by that little black box data, right, that was processed, that Aaron does that. And like BC said, you know, kind of like one of those, oh shit moments, like I didn't mean for that to happen. Like I didn't mean for it to, you know, my rage to get a hold of me like that. Grant goes down and he very quickly hops in that truck, scoots it forward, threads the tires over Grant. Okay. People who do bad things to other people sometimes still have this sense of something, right? So he may not have wanted to actually roll tires over Grant. And it would also speak to what BC was saying earlier when people, when you have a scene where a loved one has done something terrible to like a family member, oftentimes that person is covered up by their clothing, by a blanket, by a towel, by something. And it's almost like something that happens subconsciously for the bad person, right? They just do it. It's to distance themselves. It's to not see what they have done. And like BC said, in this case, it's literally with the truck, covering him up with the truck. And then comes the story of, oh gosh, the truck rolled down the parking lot.
Yeah. Anytime we're looking at it and we have all the pieces, which it sounds like we have a lot of them, that starts to make sense. Because you always have to reenact everything. You take what you have during an investigation. We know a full investigation wasn't done, but, you know, Angie's gone through great lengths to get the truck, to get these items and these things. But when you can start to reenact what is supposed to happen based on a statement, then you start to look at the evidence and you say, well, can this physically happen? If it can't physically happen, could someone be mistaken? So if a witness or someone gives a statement and says, this is what I saw, okay, or this is what I didn't see. I was looking down, I didn't see anything. I looked up, and the next thing you know, the truck has moved. But then if there are other statements to say, well, no, I did see the truck, it was moving or whatever. Once statements start to change, but the evidence doesn't, and you start to add it up and you can't reenact it, that means potentially someone's lying or missing some information. But it does look like that. It looks like a fight could easily happen, or at least a sucker punch. Grant could have fallen backwards, just like we talked about, unconscious. We've seen it before in real life. One punch knocks somebody out. They fall flat backwards.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Yes. It's happened a few times. I mean, in other words, I can only imagine if you did a case study on it. When someone gets punched one time, completely unconscious, and then they fall flat backwards. If they hit any kind of object, a coffee table, a stair step, the edge of a stage in a bar, stuff like that, or very sharp, craggy type rocks in the ditch, then, oh no, I've done something. My anger's gotten a hold of me, just like you said. Potentially you could jump into the truck and pull it right over to physically not see it and to buy yourself some time and to try to describe this is what happened. But like we talked about in the pictures and those sort of things, it does not look like a truck has rolled backwards. That's
and those
all.
tires, I mean, if nothing else, the first thing that before we even saw the pictures, you know, I think the tire, I was like, I need to see pictures so we can see what those tires looked like. Cause it feels more like he pulled into the ditch, just hearing it, you know, then it rolled down. And that was before we had even seen it. So as soon as we saw those tires cut, we started, I had BC laid out in the kitchen so we could reenact.
Yeah.
history.
I mean, you have to do it. Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the other thing, too, is that if you look at those pictures really closely, and again, one of my friends is the one who found this out, this mighty team, we call it Grant's Army, but she noticed there's a milk jug under the front left tire, and that, you know, it's just a regular old, you know,
Litter.
Kroger milk jug, whatever. Yes, it's litter, but it's mashed forward. It's not mashed backward. So the tire comes to rest on it, and it's mashing the milk carton forward instead of what should be the reverse, and the milk carton should have been flattened. So just little things like that.
Well, those are big things. And that's what would have been seen in an investigation.
Right. Which there's also we found before we got the results for the forensics, we had found tire tracks, like where you squeal out, squeal back in, that match this exact patterns, and we have pictures of those from the sidewalk and from the road of where a vehicle looked like. This is before we found out we knew any of or had any theories developed. We saw the tire tracks where they had backed out, like squealed backwards and then squealed back in really fast, coming back. So I mean, when I said the other night, I just want to clarify this. When I said the other night on the Dan Abrams show with Jesse Weber, I said I had theories, and I said one of them is the baseball bat, which is. But when I think about this theory, and I do know about Aaron's rage, and I also know that the counselor this wasn't a person that either one of us had picked. This was a person that I asked to be chosen by the court as a neutral party to be a counselor for the kids. And when she took the stand and testified that she was, and I paraphrase this, but we have this transcript under oath where she took the stand and testified, hey, do you think he could have killed his son? I hope he didn't. But I have seen his rage and his impulsivity and anger level. I have witnessed it myself. And if that was what was there that day, then yes, he would have killed Grant. And so that's something that she'd seen, but I've also experienced it in many of the situations that I've talked about in our past. I don't know that Grant ever had. And, but I will say that it does make sense as to why the glasses were down. It makes sense glasses were down by the sidewalk and the grass. And at that point, once the glasses are off, Grant is rendered visionless. He might at that point could have seen a foot and a half in front of him, but he could not make anyone out. So at this point, he's visionless. In addition to that, he wouldn't know if he had been hit already. He's not going to know if he's facing the ditch, behind a ditch, in front of a ditch, his head spinning. We do have an eyewitness who saw the truck, and I'm not going to give the color away just to protect the integrity of the investigation that we're doing, right? But he saw a witness that had come forward a long time ago that saw the truck parked, a vehicle parked, blocking that entrance that Grant would have used into WPI. So it adds up that the vehicle was stopped, that Grant stopped. Grant, that was where it ensued. The glasses get popped off down at the bottom, and then Grant's back is facing the ditch. And with it like that, and and him being a little lower, if he had stepped down in that ditch just a little bit, he's going to be eye level with the only witness. At that point, he gets cold cocked or hit again, and he falls straight back. I've measured the distance personally. It's the same height from that edge of that ditch back to that rock. That if you look at the pictures, I'm really talking to people listening. If you look at the pictures of the incident themselves, or you'll see the truck, and then you hear, Aaron's story, which is Grant was dragged and then under it. If that was the case, there would, right outside the driver's door, and I'm sorry if this seems grotesque to people, but it's the only way to get to tell the story. Is there's a rock with a large pool of blood on it outside the driver's door, and you're showing it right now. There would be no way that there would be a pooling of blood out here, and he ends up on the inside of that tire.
Right.
So at some point he was bleeding there.
So that's
on that point, and that truck then wasn't there, and that's where we're talking about. He could have fallen back, hit his head on the rock. At that point, Aaron, I've seen him do it. Snaps out of the bad action that he's trying to ensue, but this time it's gone past
too far.
Yeah, it's gone too far, and maybe he moves him, which is why he said he was laying like he was in bed, which would be a comfortable position, a remorseful.
That's actually a great point.
It's a remorse. It's a remorse kill. It's a remorse position. It's a position of where he goes, no, he was laying like he was in bed. Like, no, I placed him comfortably. Even said his hands were like crossed on his chest. And when the paramedics got there, that's how they found Grant. So after all this rolling and tumbling he was supposed to do down 2 or 3 rocks and hit his head on 2 or 3 rocks and went down the ditch and was dragged by this truck and his clothes are on him, and Drew Hall says, no, he looked fine. I didn't understand. And then you hear Aaron say, well, he was like he was laying in bed. But it all of that, none of the other could be possible. And him looked like he was laying in bed.
No.
Like, this is going to be somebody that's rolled up in a ball. I mean, I've thought about 1,000. You could be rolled up in a ball. You could be, your clothes would be, he wore those dry fit shorts and a dry fit shirt. They would have been ripped to shreds off of him. There's no way that, even if you just common sense, if you take all the descriptions you've heard from the only witness of what happened, all the versions, there's no way that a person, whether it be my son or anyone, ends up in a comfortable position like they're in bed under a Toyota Tacoma on his back with his hands folded. There'd be one, I mean, I'm not trying to be grotesque, but there'd be one arm behind him.
It would be terrible.
One arm over him. He'd have a leg on. I mean, this is what first responders see. And that in itself should have alerted. They just, the paramedics worked really hard. I know that, but I just, I fully believe that this is a very plausible and it explains a lot, and it makes very much sense. And then he covered him with the truck, which is an additional remorse piece. And at that point, he's grasping for how to explain this. So all he can say to the driver, all he can say to the dispatcher is, it must have been the gears. It must have been the gears. And then to me, he tells me, when he called me to tell me the truck had just flipped on Grant. And that's before he really thought thought the whole thing through and how that couldn't be possible. But even with that, what has been told by him could not end up in a person under the truck in a comfortable position like they're laying in bed with their hands folded on their chest. That's an absolute impossibility. And somebody placed him like that.
I think he placed him like that as best he could. I don't think Aaron would have been able to move him too much, just the weight of Grant.
And I'm not sure that Grant hadn't, trust me, I've thought of everything, and I wake up in the night thinking of everything, but I absolutely believe that he could have rolled himself. If he was still alive, like Drew Hall said, then, and I have no reason to doubt him as a witness. And I thank Ruth Bashinsky so much and the Daily Mail, because they are tenacious and they're investigating, and they're just so grateful to them. But I have no reason not to believe Drew Hall, that when he saw him, he was under the truck, and I just see no other way but that, like Mr. Dan Hodges said, he could not have died without assistance. And so let's explain how we've come to the conclusion that it was a traffic incident and closed it. Yeah.
Right. Precisely. And and that's what we talked about. If Grant hit his head on that rock, and even in shock, he himself could have even almost kind of sat up and then
or rolled, trying to get away.
Or rolled, right. And so that would be, you guys, the rock she's talking about, when she said covered in blood, it is covered in blood, like down both sides. It looks much more like he hit the rock rather than the rock
I'll be right
hit
back.
him. Okay. It's not like, because we've talked about, did he get hit in the back of the head with something? I think that was people's initial thoughts. Like, he had baseball equipment. What if he was hit with his own bat? These kinds of things. But the way that rock looks, that pattern on that rock does not appear that way. In fact, it looks much more, like I said, like his head hit the rock instead. So good night, Bosco. So I believe I know what she's doing right now.
I did.
So Angie has that rock now.
And it was, I'm sorry, wait, hold on. Okay, there you go.
There you go.
So this is, if you look really closely, that's Grant's blood. But this rock was in the ditch, kind of the way I'm holding it. But see how sharp it is?
Mm-hmm.
This is the one that we pulled straight out of the dirt. And the dirt, is down, the dirt end is down here, and you don't see any. So Gracie actually pulled this rock out of the dirt herself. So you see how this is the bottom that would have been
goes in down. The dirt.
Correct. And there's nothing. But then when you go to the top.
Yep.
And then you get to the top over here with the sharp. So, I think this is definitely his. We brought it home, and our dog at the time, who since passed, grieving from Grant, but he immediately, I've never seen a dog out like that, but he had been looking for Grant. And when this rock came in, he just,
wow,
he went berserk. But yeah.
So
that's the one rock. And then there was a small bleed out under the truck, which would make sense because you're going to have a larger bleed out at the initial impact with a head injury than you are the secondary positioning.
Right.
And though I have those rocks as well, and I won't go to pull those out, but I will say that Gracie also found those, and Gracie's tough as nails, but she found those, but she had to dig 2 layers down. So they had been buried.
Okay. Oh, okay. So we got a lot of people in the chats just commending you, Angie, and speaking to your strength and those kinds of things. And I fully agree.
Thank you.
But so that's the scene, guys. That's the scene. And that's the tip of the iceberg in the dirtiness here.
Yeah. Can we say one more thing before we leave this?
Please do.
I don't think I've ever brought this out I want to make sure we get this out ever. I don't think I've ever brought this out, but we're talking about everything at the scene and how the autopsy was declined. And then he actually denied that he had even been offered an autopsy, even in court under oath. He denied that he'd been offered an autopsy. He finally admitted in like October of that year to me in a counseling session to gig me that he had, I was offered an autopsy and I turned that down. But I will say this, that he also, denied organ donation. And but he led me to, but he didn't want to donate Grant's internal organs that would have saved so many lives. He wanted to donate that night. He wanted to donate Grant's tissue, his skin, and his cornea. And that is also very telling to me because that is the evidence. The evidence is that the skin is intact. The organs, he didn't want to donate those organs, but he wanted to get rid of Grant's skin.
Yeah, that's odd. Thinking for sure. And so we will talk.
But nothing left Grant because Grant had COVID, so that was God. But anyway, yes.
Well, that's also true. Grant had COVID just prior to this happening, and so because of that, he was not able to donate organs either way. So it's saying that the law in Tennessee regarding autopsies is that it is mandatory. So if it is an unnatural death, meaning you know that this person didn't have a terminal illness documented, these kinds of things. If it's a child, if it's whatever, if it's an unnatural death of a certain age and by a certain cause, an autopsy is mandatory, okay, per law, whether you want one or not. Even parents don't get to say no. And a death from a traumatic event / vehicular accident, which this has been deemed, this is what we have as recorded. He was death by vehicle. That would fall under the traumatic category that would then mandate this to be, an autopsy would be mandated. The only time that's not going to happen is if the medical examiner signs off on it to say not necessary. And in this case, Aaron personally declined wanting one. But like I said, he wouldn't even necessarily get that option unless the medical examiner also signed off that it didn't happen, or that it didn't need to happen. So that's what happened here. We have here the narrative of the cause and manner of death, and this would be from a John Poss. Excuse me, do not let me call him doctor. He's not a doctor. It's John Poss, Poss. So we've talked before. Oh, you guys, just before I forget, that scene was an active scene for 57 minutes, 5-7. In 57 minutes, a 911 call was made. First responders get to the scene. Aaron is they're talking to the police. Grant is being assessed by paramedics. They get Grant to the ambulance. They drive off. The police do or don't take witness statements because we don't have them. And then everything is gone in 57 minutes, minus Grant's phone, Grant's glasses, and his necklace that were left behind at the scene.
No, he had his necklace on, but it was a ball cap.
Oh, his ball cap, excuse me, that were left at the scene. 57, you guys, under an hour, wrapped up, tidied up, a bow put on it.
And they called a mom and pop tow lot and just had it towed there.
No, I can see. You're good.
Yeah, and they had it towed there. So look at my screen. So I will go on and read to you now. Let's see here. This was last little tidbit. There was never an appointment. Aaron and Grant did not have an appointment for Ward Performance Institute that morning. Okay, so I want to make that perfectly clear. So these are the words of the medical examiner / investigator. So what that means, you guys, is that you don't have to be, let me see what's going on here. I don't know, but everything looks good over there.
Yeah, you're okay. So good.
You guys just say something in the chats if you can't hear me or something. But so a medical examiner / investigator, you don't have to have a medical background for this. You don't have to have a criminal justice or any kind of police work, law enforcement work background for this either. So this guy at the time, John Poss, was the medical examiner investigator, and he was also, Angie, would you like to tell him what else he was as a job title?
Yes, he was the assistant. He was the assistant. I'm not sure what that would be called. But he was the Sumner County Emergency Medical Services. The head of that, his last name's Henson, and John Poss was the assistant director. Assistant
director
of the Sumner County Emergency Services, and he told me to my face that he was in charge of the scene.
Perfect. Bless you. Perfect. I'm glad that he considers himself to be such, because he could probably answer some great questions, right?
That's right.
If he in fact was in charge of this scene. And so he says, per his words, decedent was struck by a vehicle and trapped underneath it due to the vehicle rolling backwards down an incline. Decedent was initially breathing but was unresponsive when found lying under the front end of the truck between the two front tires. Injuries included lacerations to scalp with bleeding from there, his nose, and his ears. I'm going to say that again. Injuries included lacerations to scalp with bleeding from there, his nose, and his ears. During extrication, decedent lost his pulse and a trauma cardiac arrest was started by EMS. decedent presented in the ER, and they just tell what hospital he goes to, what kind of IVs he had in, chest decompression had been performed, and they just talk about, when he was pronounced dead. So John Poss says this. John Poss, head of this investigation, evidently working as ME/investigator, and assistant director of the entire Sumner County EMS, leaves out in his narrative the actual fatal wound, which was the skull fracture. So we've said oftentimes in regarding Grant's case, it's a lot of times not what we see, it's what we don't see, I feel like. And people can be complacent in their charting. People can have a bad day and be slammed and, make mistakes. All kinds of things can happen. But for the investigator on this case to leave out the actual fatal wound, blows my mind. What say you, BC?
No, same thing like we talked about. And even in the comments, people are saying that it all starts with the shutting down kind of the scene inside of 57 minutes. And then from there, you can start to see where people are getting limited information and making decisions, based on that, like potentially that of the ME report. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, well, why wasn't it even done thoroughly? Why was
Okay, I think we're back to normal.
okay?
Oh, they lost audio when I lost. Sorry, guys.
No.
Sorry, there's always got to be something, or else it's just not.
It's because I talk.
You have to say that again.
You know what? To be fair, I think he was filling space because my stuff was messing up, and so it was about just how everything doesn't add up. So I'm sorry, guys, for those of you that couldn't hear us for a hot minute, but we're back. So I read to you. You guys did hear John Poss's narration, right? Or the narration of what happened. Okay, to Grant. So he said again, because this is killing me, he does not mention at all the skull fracture. But then we have Grant's death certificate that actually lists as a cause of death, run over by automobile, and it says multiple blunt force trauma. That would have been what on his death certificate is the cause of death. Multiple blunt force trauma. So, okay, so that's also not true. So neither one of these, if you follow me on Instagram, you might have caught that earlier, but I put both of these up because neither one of these disagree with each other. And they both are inconsistent with Grant's actual physical condition. He didn't have multiple blunt force trauma wounds, and he didn't have none. He had one. And I'm not sure why that's not coming through so clear in this paperwork here. I don't know. Angie, what you got there?
I just think you're the first one that's put it all together in one place. I really believe that. And I've talked to people today that I've shared that with, and the people that are on the team that are working every day believe that it's the first time that anyone, and that goes to that's kudos to you being in Grant's Army, that you are the one that's brought that. This is what's, with your medical knowledge and with your ability to look at things and parse them, you are able to bring that all together and say, look, not only do these not match, they're not correct. And that's what I believe too. It's I know that was out there, but it's like it all is in God's timing. It all comes together when it's supposed to. And no one sat down and just looked at each document. We knew they didn't match. We knew they were incorrect, but nobody sat down and just put them all out there together and said, look, and explained it so well. Look how wrong this is, or look how inconsistent it is. And it's the same people filling out all the forms. And I think that just goes to you, putting that all together in one place and putting a light on it. Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll see, but I do have some calls to make.
I do. Mm-hmm.
On that one. But so that's just one piece of the inconsistencies that we see here. And unfortunately we see it throughout. So that's John Poss. We'll come back to him at another time. I'm quite certain about that. I don't have any, I don't doubt that at all. And I think that the reason it stood out to me is I was telling BC, even just something as simple as like charting, right? For the hospital, you can have a bad day, or like I said, you could have 7 codes that day and blah, blah, blah. And it can be wild and crazy. And you could be negligent. And maybe, in one piece of charting here for Grant's case, one of these things was something like that, where things just weren't charted properly, or fully, that can happen every now and then. But the fact that we keep running into that with the documentation on Grant, is kind of what's killing me. And then when you're the actual person who's supposed to write the summary of events and injuries, dealing with someone's death, you kind of really don't have any wiggle room. You don't have a choice to get it wrong or to have it be incomplete. So that's what screams to me.
And that's what screams to me too, because as a pharmacist, I have no wiggle room. If I'm sick, if I'm practicing and I don't feel well, if I've had a patient escalate on me and I've had to de-escalate a situation, if somebody's come in and robbed me at gunpoint, and that has happened, I still have to go back to the bench and I have to be 100% correct, or I could hurt someone in your family. So for me, even the yes, we're all human thing, I can't even relate to that, because in my profession,
I say that. I mean, nurses shouldn't either, but
no, well, I mean, I'm just saying from the way I feel about it is I totally get we're all human, and I'm going to make a mistake in the pharmacy, and I do. We all do, because we're all human, but I can't make a charting error, because if I make a charting error in the patient's chart, that's going to go back to insurance. It rolls up the hill, it rolls down the hill.
Absolutely.
If you don't catch an allergy today, there was a man so severely allergic to just amoxicillin that if he had gotten the prescription the doctor had called in, it could have killed him. He had an EpiPen for it.
Yeah.
And it was just caught. So, and I was tired today. I was tired and I was dragging. So it really angers me that there's so much, laziness and just lackadaisicalness and just not filling out forms properly. None of the documents I've received are even signed. So I just, that's my take on it. I know we're all human. I'm just saying I can't afford to be wrong.
No, you can't. And you're right.
I expect someone that's dealing with my child, or with your child, or God forbid your child, that they would be the same mindset. We have to get this right. Because I'm always thinking about the grandmother and the mother and the father at home and the people it would affect.
Yeah, and BC and I, we talk about this on here a lot. We play Yahtzee all the time, and he was joking about my writing a slash through my O's or zeros. When I write a zero, put a slash through it. Right, and I'm sure you learned it the same way I did, because in school, for nursing and you for pharmacy, you learn to do that, so that can't be confused with the letter O, right? Everything you do is so that in no uncertain terms, someone can go back 20 years later, read what you wrote, and have a clear picture of precisely what was going on with no questions whatsoever. So that's why this is huge when it comes to the documentation. And we're looking at, we have paramedic reports, ER reports, trauma intake reports, ED reports, the trauma surgeon reports, up to now the medical examiner investigator report, and finally with the death certificate from the ultimate medical examiner, and what he had to say. And when we see kind of consistently inconsistencies, that's a problem. And so I understand that in that portion of things, this is not all one giant cover up. You can't possibly make that many people be a part of one giant cover up. Unfortunately, that pads what I do think is some surrounding corruption. So in saying that, it is getting late. This is night shift after all, but it's getting late. It's getting late. But can we do, and it's going to be tough to do this, I think, but can we do maybe a bullet point or Cliff's Notes version of some figures involved? We can touch on school. We can touch on church. We can touch on politics. We can touch on whatever you want to touch on. I will let you know that now every time I send a story out regarding Grant, that you see, I have also tagged all of the people I think that we're about to mention. And I'm sure multiple other people have all the time, but just know that they're getting notified of this as well multiple times a day. So, where do you want to start with that? I mean, go back and start and move forward, or
it doesn't matter. I mean, I can bullet point it pretty quickly. You can go back all the way to the people that were in positions in just a simple divorce court, where Aaron's money bought him what he wanted. That's Judge Philip Smith, and that was separation of the kids and I. Then when claims of abuse came up, they put me in jail until I learned to shut my mouth to fight for my children, and I didn't stop. So the corruption started there. During that same time, the kids were yelling and screaming for help at the school, which is Grace Christian Academy. There were teachers there that knew. There were coaches there that knew. There was the headmaster, Robbie Mason, that knew. And they all dismissed it based on Aaron saying that I was crazy in the divorce court documents. They are mandated reporters. Everyone in the state of Tennessee is a mandated reporter if we suspect or see anything that's out of. Some have a higher burden than others: educators, pharmacists, nurses, doctors.
Particularly, let me just interrupt real quick. Not only if you see something, if a child comes to you to tell you something, such as, my dad is doing these really, really bad things to me, and has been since I was a little girl. You guys, if you didn't catch part 1 and part 2, I'm referring to Gracie, who is Grant's little sister. So that's its own. Gracie has her own story in all of this. So I don't want to gloss over that, but just keep that in mind. Go back and listen to 1 and 2, but that's what we're referencing here. We wanted to give you guys the scene and let you understand why what Aaron said could not possibly corroborate Grant's injuries and the way the scene actually looked, and really shed a light on the fact that no investigation has been done, just in that of itself, without even needing to know the history of everything else that went on in that household. But now that's what Angie's doing. Sorry to interrupt, but she's doing that now to kind of bring you up to speed on all the other stuff that led up to this morning at WPI. Okay, go ahead. So you're talking about Tennessee as a mandatory reporting state. Correct. That's right. And Gracie had gone to the principal of the school and told them what her father was doing, to which she told Gracie to get, she told Gracie that she called the headmaster and Robbie Mason and told Gracie that it was old news and to get back in the car. At that point, Gracie had herself barricaded inside the principal's office with the doors locked. Now, mind you, he has us separated at this point. Grant then went to the school. Grant went and called a meeting of the coaches. He was not going to play back. He was not going to play ball anymore for the school, which was a huge hit. And they needed him that next night. He was not going to play anymore until they got the situation under control. So he had a meeting with the administration. And it ended up not being like he asked for. It wasn't the administration of the school, Robbie Mason's and those people. It was actually Lynn McNatt, Coach, I can't think of his last name right now, so get off the hook, but Coach Bob. And then also Rona Branson, the principal of the elementary school and middle school, and Amy Curl, the guidance counselor. And they went into Grant. And let me just go ahead and say that anything I say, I have record of. And this isn't slander, guys. This is all on record.
I mean, Grant actually recorded, bless his heart, he recorded that meeting. So we have Grant trying to talk and trying to express himself and saying that everyone knows Gracie's been sexually abused and no one is doing anything about it, and it's spreading in the school. And they were trying to tell Grant, they were trying to calm it down. So, I mean, this was a conversation between Grant and heads of the school that are openly discussing Gracie's sexual abuse, and not one of them reported. And even in the instance that one of them had, he might still be here. Gracie might not have endured the rape in North Carolina. Then we go from there to the school. He was encouraged by, quote, church administration, Grace Chapel at that time, who was run by, quote, Pastor Steve Berger, who considered himself an old country preacher, but it was a mega church. He was encouraged to go to him and tell him what his dad was doing to try to protect Gracie and I. Grant reluctantly did not want to go, but Grant went and told this pastor of this church what happened. And the pastor this pastor, I don't call him a pastor, he's not one, but he didn't do anything. He didn't report it. He didn't call the sheriff's department. He did nothing. They did nothing, absolutely nothing. They never reported this. In addition to that, so as you can start to see, like, everyone would hear about us, even in the divorce courts, and we would just continue to get smushed down and smushed down. It's just the same pattern as the investigation that we're talking about. And Grant, if you look at that, it's just us talking and us trying to find the proof, but there's already a story out there and everybody's pushing me away. Then we get to the courts in Williamson County with Magistrate Jacques Cabell. Grant told him directly that he was afraid that his father was going to kill him. And he told him to go back home, that he was big enough to take care of himself. And when he did that, he looked at the size difference between the two.
Okay, guys, I'm going to say that. I'm going to reiterate that. Because when you talk about things that make you want to vomit, part 74 in this case, this is one of them. And that one part, it not only brings tears to my eyes, but it makes me rageful. The magistrate looked at Grant when Grant, a teenage boy, tells the magistrate that he is concerned his father is going to kill him. And he looks at Grant's size versus Aaron's size and tells him to go home, that he was a big enough boy to take care of himself.
Mm-hmm. And then also there's a paper document to document that, because Grant had told his CASA helper. There's paperwork to document that as well. And then when we went back to court to protect Gracie, that was 2018. And when we went back to court to protect Gracie, Grant wasn't with us. He was dead, just like he told Magistrate Cabell. And Magistrate Cabell never said a word to me and Gracie about Grant. Never said, I'm sorry, never said boo, never said anything. He just looked at Gracie and said, Gracie said, I'm going to die. My father is coming after me next. He sexually abused me all these years. And he said, you're lying. So, and then you start to see a larger pattern develop. In the middle of all of that, I kept fighting. And so we appealed the 2018 decisions and I ended up in front of Deanna Johnson, Senator Jack Johnson's wife, who all of these people go to Grace Chapel. I'm not sure where Magistrate Cabell goes, but everyone else goes to Grace Chapel.
And when she references Grace Chapel, guys, so it was on the same campus as Grace Christian Academy. So so you've got private school, elementary through high school, like a couple of different portions there. And then you've got the church. Okay. It's a beautiful setting. Mm-hmm. You've got, a lot of people that attend both the school and the church. And so when you hear reference GCA, that's the school. And then Grace Chapel is the church. Steve Berger, who she references, was the pastor of that church. Also headed up the school at the time, and then was, I guess, whatever you want to call it, enough to, in business world, have these be two separate entities. So if one falls, the other one will not. That's how that kind of goes. But go ahead. I just want to make sure that everyone knows what you can kind of picture what you're talking about when you're referencing the church and the school. Yeah. It's very close knit.
And also, I also want to say that I'm not telling a story. I'm not slandering. I'm just telling facts that I have the proof to, and that they know I have the proof to back up what I'm saying. And those are mostly court documents that are under oath. So from there we go, no one's doing anything for us. And then we get in front of Deanna Johnson, who was Senator Jack Johnson's wife, who was the judge, the circuit court judge. And you can look at her record. You can Google her right now and find out that she's been dismissed from so many cases, including the Brentwood Academy rape case, because she does not know how to be a judge. But she brought me into her courtroom, and she already knew about us because the head of Grace Chapel of security, Bob Woodward, former Navy SEAL, told her about us and sent me a text message saying, I talked to Deanna about you. She said she'll take care of you guys when you end up in front of her. Well, when I ended up in front of her, she said that I was libelous in court against Aaron, and
That's the
she
word I was
ruled that
looking
I
for.
could not protect my children until Gracie turned through any court action till Gracie turned 18.
So you guys, when I was talking about Grant talking about going to get custody of Gracie and all these things, and I said it's not because his mother is unfit. You know, when you hear of a sibling trying to take over another sibling, often it's because either both parents should not be. It's because of this ruling that so that Deanna, well, it's not Harris any longer. I mean, I guess, does she go by Harris?
She goes by Deanna Johnson.
She does go by Johnson.
Yeah.
So that Deanna Johnson ruled this against Angie. She said she was a libelous. That's the word I'm always looking for when I refer to this. And essentially like an aggressive litigant. And that she put an order out that, to be fair, until this case, Angie, I didn't even know that this was a possibility, but or something that a judge could do.
It's not. It's actually illegal. And if I would have had the funds to appeal it, or also we could have easily have it overturned. But in addition to that, the reason that I didn't appeal it was because this counselor that had been assigned by the judge started to say that I was lighting little fires everywhere with court, and I needed to stop. And she was the only thing holding Aaron off the kids. So I had to play that game as well. And guess where she went to church? Grace Chapel.
Good gosh. You guys, you can't make this stuff up.
I couldn't go further. And then I was in front of Deanna Johnson with her ripping me across the coals in February of 2020. She ruled I could no longer file. And what all my friends, what all of us knew was that if I had something filed in court against Aaron, he would leave us alone because he had to be on his best behavior. So when she removed that, Grant was gone. The first time he was alone with him, less than 6 months after that ruling. I could no longer protect my children, and Grant was gone. And so that's how that, and then we end up in front of Magistrate Cabell again, which is when he told, so see how everything is like twisted and turned, and we're not listened to. It's just, you just see all these incomplete wrongs.
It's perfection in the sense that he set this up so well and happened to be just perfectly connected enough that at every turn, and you guys, this is a tale as old as time in one sense. We've talked about this, like the narcissist that comes off polished and clean. He was a public figure. And then but then behind closed doors is the abuser, the aggressor, and then in public is able to keep a calm demeanor and make his wife, or then his ex-wife, look like she's lost her mind, and then start to tell as such. And she's saying, no, like this happened to my daughter. My daughter's telling you this happened to her. My son's telling you this happened. And the more the kids are telling, and the more this is not gaining traction and no one's believing her, the more you, Angie, probably are losing your mind in the sense of listen to me, which makes him come back around to say, see, she's crazy. She won't leave me alone. She won't leave me alone.
Well,
so
by that time I had learned how to play the game. I had people talking to me about how, I couldn't talk back. I even still today, I had trouble with emotional regulation because I was actually trained by psychiatrists not to react in front of a judge. And so, and trained not to react to him, trained to be calm, trained to be like my mother instincts. They were using them against me. And so I had to learn to like cut my mother instincts off so that because mother instincts are what they're using court against you. So I still have trouble today going, okay, that's a right reaction. It's okay for me to feel like this because I was so ostracized and I was so stared at and I was so humiliated in this community and at Grace Chapel and at Grace Christian. They would point at me and they would stare and they would try to figure out where my fourth or fifth eye was and if I had horns. And it was, but I acted like I didn't see any of them. And they thought I was crazy, but I want them to all know, and I've said it before, I saw you. I wasn't crazy. I was myself, and I watched them, and I watched what they did. And so the other thing that hurts me so badly is how bad that hurt Grant. He was so hurt that, and that's the first thing he said in the meeting to the administration group. He said, "My mom has been mistreated, and I want that fixed." I was even removed. My parental rights were removed at the school, and I have parental rights to know my children's grades and those type things, but they removed me from everything. And still to this day, before Grant passed, I didn't even get the parental emails. Nothing. I got nothing from the school. I still can't get anything more than a transcript. And when they sent me the transcript, half of Gracie's transcript is another student.
Oh, geez.
So, so we move on from there into the magistrate once Grant has passed. Now we've got all this going on in Gallatin, but also let's make the note that Aaron sat next to Bill Lee, the governor, in church, and Jeff Long, the director of Homeland Security, who's the head of Homeland Security now, was at one time the Williamson County Sheriff. He is the one that has the forensic on file that Grant and Gracie did for them in 2017, July of 2017. No, pardon me. No, yep, July of 2017. That was enough to bring charges against Aaron for sexual abuse of Gracie, and Grant corroborated it. But they made up some excuse, and Jeff Long didn't prosecute him. Now Jeff Long is also at Grace Chapel, and Jeff Long also now has moved up with the governor from the sheriff. Now he's the director of Homeland Security. He was also the director of the THP.
Yep.
The THP should have been on the Tennessee Highway Patrol should have been on the scene that day. That was not a parking lot accident. One thing Pasta does say that he shouldn't have said is the wheels of the tire were on the road. The wheels of the truck were on the road. That was not a parking lot incident. That was something that happened on government property in riprap in a ditch, and the Tennessee Highway Patrol should have been there.
Should have been there.
And so there's Jeff Long called off. Now we've got, I don't stop fighting. So I've gone to Don Bandy, the police chief, who will not meet with me. I mentioned that earlier. I've contacted Ray Whitley multiple times. Ray Whitley has come out in the Daily Mail and said there's no reason to investigate, and that I don't know all the facts. I responded to him in the Daily Mail this past week and said, I know more facts than he has, and I fully expect an answer like that from him. But what I don't expect is of someone like him to announce to a grieving mother, and I still am every day, that my son, that he has more facts about my son than I do, that he's waited 3.5 years to tell me in a worldwide publication. I mean, that is the lowest of low class, but I expect it from these people, because at this point we've also been to the director, at that time he was the assistant to Governor Lee, Jonathan Scrimetti, who is now the Attorney General. And in an internal memo, Alex Willis, who at that time worked for the Williamson Herald, Alex Willis questioned Governor Lee and a presser about the Grant Solomon murder. And he said, and the talking points, Bill Lee was terrified and was quickly grabbed his water bottle and then into the presser. But in the talking points between Jonathan Scrimetti, who's now the Attorney General, and Bill Lee, Jonathan Scrimetti preps him for that in case he gets that question. And he says to him, this was a homicide, period. And then Ray Whitley addresses this, the DA addresses this in his, it's like, I don't know why Jonathan Scrimetti would make a statement like that. He obviously had no weight or opinion. It carried no weight. It carried no weight. He didn't mean what he was saying. Well, of course he meant what he was saying. He said it to the governor. Come on. But in addition, that was his job. In addition to that, though, Melanie Hicks also went and challenged Jonathan Scrimetti in public. It's on YouTube. You can watch that, where she challenged him before the Supreme Court before he was ever chosen to be the next Attorney General. And in that conversation with Melanie, he comes to the mic and he addresses Grant's situation and says it was a crime scene. But sometimes you just don't ever know what happened. And he didn't have the authority to open a case. So now we've got, in addition to that, the whole time it's going on, the minute Gracie releases her video, instead of, the minute Gracie really asked me if she could release her video to save our lives. And I won't go into that right now, but she did save our lives because Aaron was coming after her. But when that happened, the church, Steve Berger, the school, has attorneys send us cease and desist letters. Now, I'll tell them right now, I didn't open one of them. My son has just died. My daughter's life is at stake. I am trying to fight for her. I'm trying to get all these facts that we have for Grant. And and so many people that I know and other people that they just thought I might be involved with Freedom for Gracie or with Grant.
Mm-hmm.
They started getting cease and desist letters and threats of lawsuits. In addition to that, Alex Willis was the only one that would publish an article that the news here won't touch it because and I'm talking about the news media, Channel 4, WTVF, WSMV, WKRN, Fox 17. None of them will touch this at all. And that's fine with me. They don't have to touch it. We fought to get it out of the state, and we have gotten it out of the state, or we wouldn't be talking to you guys, even though you have ties here. In addition to that, Alexander Willis had started being able to publish about this story and the connections with Grace Chapel and the corruption pieces and how everyone's connected to everyone, and Aaron's connected to all of them. That's everyone in position of power. Aaron's connected to. So, Alex Willis was told one day at the Williamson Herald that he can't publish anymore. And listen, that was because Steve Berger went into the head of.
Okay, I didn't know this.
He went into. I can't remember. One of them is a senator representative. It's Mr. Freeman. I don't know if it's Bob or Bill. It's the older one. Owns the publication that he owns the conglomerate, the Nashville Scene, and all the Herald.
Williamson Herald, yeah.
So he owns the Williamson Herald, and they had lunch together. And at the end of lunch, Steve Berger put a $100 million lawsuit in front of him and said, if you mention Aaron Solomon one more time, I will sue you. And guess what? Alexander Willis's stories got canned. And Alexander Willis ended up leaving the Williamson Herald. And the head of the Williamson Herald told Alex Willis this story point blank. And Alex would come on under oath and tell you that today. So everyone was in the process of shutting us down, shutting everyone down and attacking us, including Steve Berger actually got on. I don't say his name here. He and his wife had a little video session they did every morning, and it had thousands of viewers. This is a mega church. And he started asking people to pray imprecatory prayers over Gracie.
I did read that.
What is, I had to actually, I know my Bible. I had to Google imprecatory prayer. I was like, what is that? So it's curses and it's abomination and on everyone that helped us. They considered us the enemy and they painted us that way. So
yeah, if you guys, I don't encourage a lot of looking him up, but if you do look up Steve Berger, it's Berger. But if you look at some of the sermons that after this stuff all was going down, the stuff like like Angie's talking about right now, I think there's one where you can even hear in the crowd somebody kind of doing like a come on, like he gets so worked up, very specifically talking about you guys, and it's just
Well, they did a full sermon. They did a full sermon on Gracie. They called it a family meeting, and they did a full 40. It was the audience, of course. They've got 3 different chapel areas that you can sit in, and then they have an outdoor area to watch the service, and then they also have the video where you can watch live. And they did a 45-minute service on Gracie Solomon and how she was a liar and how she wasn't sexually abused and how. Yes, at that time, Gracie was 13 years old and fighting.
Yeah, I hope you guys are listening.
And listen, these people in these people in this congregation that they actually they still today will look at us here in this area and they look like they're, in the only movie I love Shrek, but it's the scene where Shrek is chased by the guys with the wooden sticks, the poles, and it's like the riot thing. Yeah. That's the way Gracie and I felt, but we don't care. I mean, we see it and we go, okay, but it doesn't bother us. But I'm just telling you, that's the environment that we have lived in. In addition to that, we've got people at the highest levels of power and government, and then also down at the level of the Gallatin police, scrambling everywhere, threatening people, scrambling to shut us down, calling it a homicide, then saying there's no reason you should call it a homicide. And these are the people in the highest levels of protection. And again, none of them, even Jonathan Skermetti, none of them will meet with me. None of them.
Well, and I think that just to go back,
and that's fine with me because their silence to me
speaks
says more than I at this point. I don't want to talk to them.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, that's fair.
They have nothing to say to me. And I'm not going to give them my time or my energy. I did try to call Ray Whitley. I tried to call him before the Daily Mail. I wanted to sit down with him and ask him about this new evidence and new information and these new facts that he had sent in a letter to Lauren Conlon, who does the podcast, What Happened to Grant Solomon. And so we played like this little phone tag thing. They say he's not in the office, and he called me back immediately, but I'd be in the pharmacy and couldn't pick up. But then after the Daily Mail article came out and he said that in there and addressed me publicly, I just said, forget it. You know, that's how you get through this. That's how you keep moving to the next step, like we're doing now. Continue to move this thing along, irregardless of what these high level of government, at some point they're going to crack, and I'm going to be the one to do it. And Gracie and we're here for it.
I fully believe that you will. I have no doubt on it. I do want to go back really quickly because I don't want to gloss over this, because I think this is one of the things that incites my anger so much in this case is when we go back to Deanna Johnson, you guys, you'll remember that's the judge that Angie was speaking on that said that she was like an aggressive litigant and all these things, and put in the order that we've since learned evidently is actually illegal, that Angie cannot put any claims against, at least in family law, against Aaron Solomon for 6 years. She put this like ban on.
She banned me. I couldn't even get Gracie an order of protection. I can't even, it's civil. She said I couldn't file anything civilly against her. I couldn't even get Gracie an order of protection. So when he was coming after her, even though everyone was like, let's get her an order of protection, and the judges would be ready to sign it, and they'd say, hang on just a minute. They'd come back and say, sorry, can't sign that.
Yeah. So on Deanna Johnson, that judge, this judge, in my opinion, I know BC and I have spoken on this, should never have been allowed to handle your case anyway due to conflicts of interest. And the reason, you guys, that I say that is because not only did Angie mention that the judge, Deanna Johnson, was married to State Senator Jack Johnson, Senate Majority Leader, in fact. Jack Johnson, so do he and Aaron know each other, Angie?
Yes.
Did they sit together at church?
In very close proximity. But the other piece is where I have the text that the head of security there at Grace Chapel, which, by the way, they put snipers in the catwalk during the church services. But and let me stop here and say, since right after this, Grace Chapel split. Steve Berger stepped down, and there was a large uprising about this, and he moved, and he's now in Fairview at one church home, and I don't keep up with him, but I just know that he's there so that for mine and Gracie's own protection.
Precisely.
Correct. But now Grace Chapel says they're under different leadership and all this. They've changed their ways, but no one's ever come to us and said we're sorry for what we did publicly, or we shouldn't have done. And so that's fine too. But Deanna Johnson and Jack and Aaron and Bill Lee and Jeff Long, and then you start to look at all the titles these people hold. This was all a planned situation, and for them to be in those positions out of that church. And yeah, I mean, but the other thing was when Bob Woodward sent me the text that he had talked with Deanna about us. And he had offered to talk to her, and I said yes. And when he talked to us about her, he said that she would take care of us when our name came across her desk. So in my mind, I thought when it got appealed up to circuit court, when the reason we appealed that was because Magistrate Cabell had told Grant and Gracie that they would never have to go back to Aaron. Then we had lunch break, which was typical. After lunch break, they come back and change their mind. He came back in and he told Grant at that point that he had changed his mind and Grant could go back, but Gracie wouldn't have to. And that destroyed Grant's. That was the moment that destroyed Grant's faith in the justice system and in every person around him that had never helped him, because Grant was very intelligent, very well spoken. He was just an old soul. And so he was very hurt that the people that listened to him on a daily basis didn't listen to him then. And so he determined that if none of them were going to help his sister, he was. And that is where I say, if that is why we have laws, and that is why we have certain policies that judges and that schools, and we have mandated reporters. That's why we have those things for those people to follow. And that's so that a young man like Grant doesn't feel like he needs to step up and be the
Right.
adult where there were no others to save his sister. Because if just one person out of all these people that I've mentioned, just one, had just done their homework and to come to me and said, "Are you crazy? You know,
Yeah.
I'm working in the pharmacy over here. I filled your prescription yesterday. I've done that. I filled their prescriptions, and then they've called me crazy. And they've taken what's in the bottle. They just don't look to see my names on it." But if just one person, one, had just stepped up and done the right thing, then Grant wouldn't have felt like he had to step up. And he had to. And I know he knew what he was doing, and I know he knew it could end in him losing his life, because he walked out of the door here and he said, the last thing he said to me was something I never thought I'd hear out of his mouth. "I don't want to die in Gallatin." And an hour later, I got a call that he was dead in Gallatin. So Grant knew. And that in itself, what happened to Grant, everyone should be trying to find out, because everyone is responsible. And so in that sense of a word, nobody should be hiding. Nobody should be running. He's not a missing child. He's a deceased child. But people should be trying to find out what happened, because I can tell you that much chaos in a family leading up to a death like that is not a coincidence. And
No.
Grant, Gracie, and me, all three of us being diagnosed with PTSD complex, which means living in it chronically. And the other person that was in our quote family not being diagnosed with that at that time is also not a coincidence. Three people, us three, had it. So Grant, he is a hero, and I try to remember that, but he shouldn't have had to be. Gracie should have her brother. And, the other day she came in and she said, and she's so strong. She's so powerful, and she knows what these people have done to her. And she's
like her
just
mama.
well, no, she's got me beat by a long shot. I learned from her. But she came in the day, she said, I fight for Grant, and we both fight for Grant. We fight for my protection. We're going to fight for her justice. That's coming. There's so much coming. And she said, "But Mom, I have to carry what my dad did to me. And I also have to carry that my brother's not here." How do you carry that? And she also carries the fact that he died to protect her. I don't know how. And that's what it hurts me more for her and for him. It's not about me. So somebody should have stepped up and just done the right thing when he died. Just one person. And so it's just like it's always been. Just one person had done the right thing. And now it's just like it's always been. Every time I fight, they try to shut us down, but I will tell you, they haven't been successful. They won't be successful. I have fought for my children for 20 years. I fought intensely for the last 13 since he took the children out of their beds in 2013 and turned me into something that I'm not. And in addition to that, I'm fighting now. We fought to get this out of the state of Tennessee with news organizations and press, and we did it. We have fought to be able to talk about it. We fought with for people like you to come along and look at things and help shed light in areas or put things together that all my multitasking, I can't just do it all. Like I said, I have to have so many people around me like you that have come and pulled this paperwork together and said, now I'm like, wow, that's what I've been thinking the whole time, but I just never had time to sit down and do that. But I tell you what they have found out is that I don't quit. Gracie doesn't quit. Grant didn't quit. And Grant he was a catalyst to start this, to shine the light on this corruption and to save his sister. But also we three planned to help other women and children at that time who were in the same situation that we were, because we had seen them, the same attorneys, They were all the same attorneys being handled, and all the fathers were millionaires, which is another thing. Aaron is a millionaire, so he has the money to pay for this. And so we plan to fight for those children and women who were oppressed by the court systems and oppressed by corruption. And Grant isn't here, but he physically, but he started the catalyst to fight for those who are oppressed. This is not just about us. It's about change. It's about, we're going to fight this so that there becomes change in order to protect and to release and these other women and children, and sometimes men, if it can be reversed. But all I'm saying is we're here to fight for everyone, not just us. And Gracie and I say all the time, we're going to finish what Grant started. And we thought we'd finish it. We thought we'd do it together. We're just doing it together in a different way.
I think you couldn't have summed it up any better than that. And, you know, you're constantly on our minds, you and Gracie both. And I just hope at every turn, we always say it, that, you know, that one more person listening, one more something, right, yes, is gonna grease the wheels of change. And I do feel like, so you guys kind of just a quick side note on all of that. Like she had said before, she quite literally was silenced. She couldn't say anything. She still did, but she wasn't supposed to be saying these things and doing these things. But now all that stuff is lifted. She can say and do whatever. Again, none of the things that she has said tonight are slander. All of it is documented, reported, evidence. It's whatever. It's through the court system. It's through reports. So all of these things that we're talking about are not made up, you know, quotes and these kinds of things. I think it's very important to know that. And then on top of all of that, we are definitely not going to stop on our end, Angie, but in terms of a larger audience, you guys at this point, we talked about it last week, but she mentioned she was on Dan Abrams, Ashley Banfield, Nancy Grace, Daily Mail. We've got a lot of people, larger names, have taken on this case and are putting Grant's name out there and really starting to put the pressure on the Gallatin Police Department and on Aaron Solomon specifically. Lauren Conlon has done a wonderful, she does, instead of doing like a couple of long shows, she does a bunch of like 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there, covering all the parts of this case. So you can kind of pick up where you want with that if you want to listen to her show. We appreciate you guys all listening, and all we want at this point is justice for Grant. And so you can find, there's a change.org petition to try to pressure Gallatin police to open this as an investigation. Again, like we said earlier, when we say open this or make it a case, it doesn't mean you've got to type in a secret code and do 14 cartwheels and move a boulder. It's literally just reevaluating what you have in front of you. And if nothing else, they have more in front of them now than they did before. We, you know, there's, I think that at every turn, we're going to continue to say there's still so much more we could tell you that we haven't. So,
and I think it's important to say right there, and I don't want to cut you off, but I just did. But I think it's really important right there to go back to something else that was in the piece by the Daily Mail, and that was a quote from Mr. Dan Hodges, the head of the private investigative team. He said, and I think it's overlooked sometimes because of everything else that's mentioned about Grant being alive and all that, but Dan said, and we're working on things right now that we know will break this case wide open. We just can't. So, I mean, I think it's passing along that hope that there is so much going on right now that the head of Mr. Dan is a man that doesn't step out there on the ledge unless he can back it up. And he stepped out there on the ledge with the Daily Mail. And I can say, you know, and the other piece about that, with as far as slander goes, is slander is opinion. And I just want to be really clear that I haven't even started with my opinions yet.
Yeah, right. I think that's fair, and it's just, and I believe you fully. Again, Angie has been tenacious and more than persistent in this, and because of that, it really is. It is gaining traction, and you know that wasn't just fluff. When I said to you the other day, I don't know if it was through a text or what, when I just said I really do feel strongly that I'm hopeful that things are changing, and I don't know what that feeling is. I can't put a finger on it, other than I truly do feel that way. And I think good things are coming for you guys. sooner rather than later with this. And then like you said, we, it's just a lot. It's a lot, but you and Gracie have been amazing. You guys, I will put on Instagram on Andrea Up Late. I'll throw it on YouTube as well, obviously, but all the links, because she's got multiple links. But really, if you do just look at, if you look at Freedom for Gracie, you can find that on YouTube, Instagram. If you just Google, at this point, if you Google a lot of these words, if you Google Grant Solomon, and the change.org, and there's Justice for Grant, these things now are starting to pop up pretty frequently, which is actually wonderful. It's wonderful, because that just means that many more outlets have it, that much more exposure is being had. So, and also we've got, in the chats, they're saying also on Twitter. So
Twitter at Dr. Angie Lee. That's actually me.
Okay.
So other people run some of the other sites, and I'm thankful for that. But at Dr. Angie Lee is me.
Okay.
And so that, and then there's also, we have a website, Freedom for the number 4 Gracie, that goes back into the history of some of what we've talked about, but told very, very in depth.
Right. And it's got pictures, I believe, as well, and crime scene photos. And I'm going to call it a crime scene, but all of that stuff. So you guys, please reach out. I will pass along any well wishes or questions you have for Angie to Angie. If you have any, if there's anything you weren't clear about when you listen, again, I totally encourage you guys to go back and watch or listen parts 1 and 2 of this. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. And like I said, there's multiple outlets you can find this information on. But yes, Liam, it's all going to be on Instagram, so you can find stuff there. But we're so thankful for you, Angie, and we appreciate you making time in your schedule. I know you were busy again tonight, and you braved tornadoes and pharmacies to get home.
When I got home tonight, Gracie said I looked like I'd been electrocuted. Which is a good description of spending a day in the pharmacy.
That's probably true.
And then I said, and I'm going on with Andrea and BC, and she was like, "You're doing what?" So I mean, we have sadness, but we do have laughter. When I walked in, and she said, I said, "I've got to hurry. I've got to be on." She's like, "What? You look like you've just been electrocuted."
Well, we will let you guys know before we wrap up, because I think it's very important that Gracie, while she does have a lot to handle, she is also thriving, and she also is athletic in her own right. She is a beast, and she is she's a really cool girl, and she's got a lot of awesome things going for her in a very positive way. And most positively of all is that Aaron finally has a permanent no contact order with Gracie. So so we know that at least something's been done enough to get that done, and that in and of itself should show that some other things probably need to be investigated. But that is some of the best news, I think, out of this at this point. So do you have anything to BC has been over here like wiping pollen off of his face. It's pollen.
Yeah, I apologize. And when it hit, it was right before right when we got on, because I apologize.
Yeah. No, you don't have to apologize.
But apologize. I was being silly with you.
Do you need a pharmacist?
Maybe. He might need prescription allergy medication.
Well, I mean, no, I get OTC. We've been selling so much Sudafed, like Zyrtec D. Zyrtec with decongestant in it because of that. So,
I mean, he was pretty good today, but I don't know. We've been painting a porch and everything, and in North Carolina, everything is yellow right now. So
there you go
with the pollen. Yeah. So, oh my goodness. But we appreciate you guys in the chats. We've seen some new folks in there, and we always welcome that and encourage it and enjoy it. So thank you so much for listening and participating and reaching out. Angie, I'm gonna throw you backstage, hon, if you have 2 more minutes.
Before you do, I just want to say I'd be very amiss not to thank, and for your listeners and everyone, I want them to know how much you and BC have done for what we can't, for this, for meeting us, for meeting me, for talking with me, for putting your brilliant minds together. And in addition to that, what we can't talk about right now is how much BC and Andrea have helped with what's going on that's walking us toward breaking this wide open. And I think that's so important to let everyone know that, you all are part of the team, and it's a very selective group, and that you're just as much helping us break this wide open as anybody. And that's where, the right people are coming together to put that power in there that we can do that. And so I just want to thank you all for being a part of that, over and above your show, and over and above your connections with your viewers. I just want, what super people you are, that you go over and above, and you're really invested in us, and you're invested in Grant, and you're invested in Gracie, and you care. And because of that, we're really have a lot of mountains that we're moving that we just can't talk about yet.
First of all, thank you so much for saying that. We feel the same way, and we truly are with you in that 100%. And to what you're speaking on, I think you're right. And so I'm really hopeful about that stuff.
Yeah.
But
mornings to come.
Mornings to come. Stay tuned, everyone. Stay tuned.
Please,
all right, everyone.
Please film me backstage. Please film me backstage.
Say bye to Angie. We'll be right back with you. 1 second. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. Oh, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
But what resolve too? I mean,
well, and that's one of those things too, where it's the worst case scenario, but you've got someone who's dug in, trust her instincts, rallied the troops, so to speak, and has done all the legwork.
That's how things happen. Yeah.
All the and it was in the comments. All the department has to do is investigate it. It's all there. When they don't, also, that's a red flag.
I mean, we've said it before, but it's like, actually, you said it a little bit earlier, kind of like a petulant, like a toddler. And it's kind of like, I won't do it, I won't do it. And the more you say, the more you won't do it, the more you won't do it. And and we said in the last show when we talked to Angie that all they have to do is because one way or another, they're either gonna, I think to their point, hopefully find nothing, or they're going to find out that they have a murder investigation. And if they find that out and figure it out and are able to convict on that, then they can be heroes in the moment. That's all it has to be. They can be heroes. They can change their whole look on this from the public, can completely just turn around. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this ego thing of we got it wrong the first time. It can be we got it right this time.
Yeah, sadly, it is usually ego. A lot of people will jump right to corruption, and maybe the findings are there's some corruption or
I feel like we were gonna have a little bit of all these things.
At least conduct unbecoming. How about that?
At the least.
Yeah. Yeah, it's oftentimes that's the loudest red flag is when people don't want to investigate something. You're giving them a reason to.
Well, you guys, thank you for hanging in there. It is late on the East Coast, my friends, but we really appreciate you guys, and definitely we'll put all this stuff back out there on Instagram on Andrea Up Late. You can always watch the shows on the Andrea Up Late YouTube channel. Again, usually we're live Tuesdays at 8/7 Central, and then it'll drop in the next day or two wherever you listen. So like, Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. I mean, if you feel like your index finger is super strong and you want to hit the buttons that say like and subscribe, you can do it. I'll be so proud of you if you do.
Yeah.
It made me so happy.
Right.
But either way, we appreciate you guys coming on. We really do appreciate your investment in these stories that we tell. And it means a whole lot. So we got BC here. We had a couple of people in the chat that were a little bit new to us, which was great. And we also had
Change Gang
podcast. I was there. I was going to do it. I was almost there.
The gun.
Okay. We had Change Gang podcast on. I think they're out west, so it's a little bit earlier for them. So I don't know if they're still on or not, but we appreciate you listening and tuning in. And actually, that person who runs that podcast was on your show Disruptors recently, right, BC?
Yes, that's probably going to be one I drop here in a day or two, and it's a new podcast coming out. I don't want to give too much away. Okay. If you dig what I've done with the Disruptors and some of the guests that I've had on, like I tell people, go start following Change Gang podcast on YouTube. I'm sure he'll eventually start having other social media accounts and stuff, but for right now, he's getting up and running. I think people are going to be pretty impressed.
Yeah, he's got, talk about a wealth of information. It's quite a crazy background that I think you guys will love to hear. And so, like BC said, he'll drop that show probably tomorrow, so you can listen to that at the Disruptors podcast with BC and Ski. So check that out. And we are going to go on and sign off so I can throw some Benadryl at BC's face and see if he catches it with his nose. And you think that's going to happen?
I got to do something. This is terrible.
All right,
my
guys.
God.
All right. Well, y'all are awesome, and we appreciate you. And as always, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Night, y'all.